have to start with a very important content warning about this video. This video is not for children. I mean, none of my videos are for children because of, how I curse like a sailor. But this video in particular, definitely not for children. So if you are a child, please stop this video now and go watch YouTube videos that are specifically made for children, like those weirdly sexual Elsa and Spider-Man videos. Remember those? Those were so weird. What the fuck were they about anyway? Okay, great. So the kids are gone, right? Let's talk about Santa Claus and how it's okay to lie to kids and tell them Santa Claus is real. I've literally made a video about this topic every 5 years or so, and I refuse to stop because as a person with no children, I have a very strong opinion about how other people should raise their children. It's the perfect crime because there is no evidence that my methods would actually royally fuck up a kid. Anyway, there's a new study that once again validates my extremely correct opinion, so it's time to make this video again. First, I'll tell you about the study that initially got me interested in this topic, the Candy Witch. Way back in 2004, psychologist Jacqueline Woolley, who is now director of the Children's Research Lab at the University of Texas at Austin, led a study in which she told a bunch of little kids about a magical being who would visit their rooms the night after Halloween. And she told them if they left out a piece of candy they didn't want, the Candy Witch would replace it with a little toy. For half the kids, that was it. For the other half, she recruited their parents to actually pretend to be the Candy Witch and swap out the candy and the toy. Afterwards, she asked all the kids whether or not they believed in the Candy Witch. The younger kids, who were around 3 years old, tended to either believe or disbelieve in the Candy Witch, regardless of whether or not their parents played along. But older kids, around 5 years old, tended to only believe in the Candy Witch if their parents played along. And those kids believed in the Candy Witch much more strongly than the younger kids did. My takeaway at the time was that around the age of 5, kids start actively looking for evidence to understand whether or not something is true. The youngest kids didn't look for evidence, the older ones did, and when they found evidence that the Candy Witch is real, they believed in her. The same is true of Santa Claus. Kids don't believe in him because they're gullible. It's the opposite. Kids believe in Santa Claus because they're skeptical and they go out looking for evidence and they find evidence that he is real. They hear the stories, they watch the movies, they sing the songs, they write their letters, they get their presents, they even sit in the guy's lap. Why wouldn't they believe Santa is real? This convinced me that teaching kids that Santa is real actually helps them develop their critical thinking skills and eventually teaches them an extremely important lesson. You need to be skeptical even of authority figures and people you trust because they'll lie to you. Hell, they'll set up an entire fake reality to convince you of the lie. And while I do feel for those parents who want to protect their children, who never want to lie to them, don't want them to believe something they know is not true, I get it. But I think that there really is a case to be made that Santa Claus benefits children. While doing my research for this video, I decided to check in and see what Woolley's been up to since the Candy Witch. And I was delighted to find this paper from 2013, which offers a comprehensive overview of the study of children as young skeptics. And I learned quite a bit from it, including a slight correction to something I originally thought the Candy Witch study showed. I came away from that study understanding that because the younger kids weren't swayed by actual evidence, we all must start off perfectly credulous, believing whatever we're told, and then slowly we start developing critical thinking skills as we age until we perfect those skills as an adult, hopefully. That's a hypothesis that's been proposed by many psychologists in the past, and it's even something proposed by Richard Dawkins as an adaptive trait that we evolved. Babies simply can't learn as quickly as they do if they're skeptical of everything their caretakers say to them. They need to just absorb. But Woolley challenges this thinking with an overview of research that has demonstrated the exact opposite. starting with one of the earliest studies on magical thinking done by Margaret Mead. In the 1930s, Mead visited the island of Manus in Papua New Guinea, where she found that the population of adults had a strong belief in ghosts and spirits and magical charms. To her surprise, though, the island's children were extremely skeptical of all of those things. And when she introduced a new magical charm to the population in the form of a wind chime, the adults immediately accepted it and started inventing stories about it, while the children just straight up ignored it. Woolley goes on to detail research that shows young children frequently decide that real things aren't real, demonstrating that they don't just default to credulity. She cites her own study from 2011 in which she hypothesized that children would not believe obviously fantastical stories unless God was involved. For instance, if you tell kids that you split the Atlantic Ocean in two so you could drive from Boston to England, they wouldn't believe it. But if you told them God helped Moses part the Red Sea, they'd believe that because parents and religious authorities have assured them that God is real and can do those things. She found that to be true, but only for older kids around the age of 6. Younger kids at the age of 4 were more skeptical, disbelieving the stories whether God was involved or not. So it seems like there's good evidence that kids aren't just little credulous knowledge sponges. And in fact, as we age, we actually start placing more trust in authority figures and culture as a whole. When those authority figures offer support for a belief, older kids are more likely than younger kids to then believe it. When they're exposed to a belief as a cultural touchstone, older kids are more likely than younger kids to believe it. So while it's true that the Candy Witch and other studies suggest that it's around 4 or 5 years old that we start becoming more skeptical by actively looking for evidence to distinguish fantasy from reality, we also may become a bit more credulous by using some shortcuts, like placing more trust in culture and authority, as well as looking for context clues. Older kids are more likely to believe something is true if it's placed in a scientific setting, for instance, and even factoring in our own emotions, as studies have shown children are more likely to be skeptical of things that make them angry or scared. And maybe that's how you end up with adults who believe the earth is flat when any fucking 4-year-old could tell you it's not. Anyway, on to the most recent study I actually wanted to talk about before getting completely sucked into 2 decades of research on children's metacognition. Back in October, psychologists at UC Berkeley published this paper in Nature Human Behavior. Exposure to detectable inaccuracies makes children more diligent fact-checkers of novel claims. Oh yeah, that's right. I was talking about how correct I am that parents should lie to their children about Santa Claus. Back on track. The researchers gathered 122 children between the ages of 4 and 7, and they tested their skeptical abilities by first showing them an ebook with pictures of animals next to true or false statements, like a picture of a zebra and a message that either said, "Zebras have black and white stripes," or "Zebras have green and red stripes." The kids were then asked if the statement is true or false. It's unclear if any children were asked if an embarrassed zebra is black and white and red all over. Thanks. I'll be here all week. Then they saw a similar setup of pictures of animals with true or false statements, but it was laid out to look like an internet search engine. Finally, the children were presented with an image showing 20 weird little alien guys called Zorpies. One Zorpie clearly had 3 eyes, but the others were all wearing sunglasses. The children were asked if it was true or false that all Zorpies have 3 eyes. But before answering, they were allowed to click as many Zorpies as they wanted to remove their sunglasses and count how many eyes they had. The researchers found that the kids who were exposed to more misinformation were more likely to click more Zorpies to be sure that the answer was true, compared to kids who saw mostly reliable animal facts in the earlier studies. So those kids learned to distrust their online environment, and they correctly deduced that they would have to work harder to fact check the Zorpie claim. The authors conclude that sanitizing children's informational environments may inadvertently dampen their natural skepticism. Instead, these findings support the counterintuitive possibility that exposing children to some nonsense may scaffold vigilance towards more subtle misinformation in the future. Boom, there you have it. I am once again proven to be the queen of parenting techniques. Lying to children is not just funny, which it is, but beneficial for honing their critical thinking skills. You're welcome, parents. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to lie to my dog that he's not allowed to go on a hike today. Oh God, I'm just kidding. I would never lie to my dog. Can you imagine? I'm not a monster. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.